There we go. We got unplugged just a little tiny bit. Make this a little bit bigger. Right there. Make me a little bit bigger. Put me right here. There we go. We got unplugged just a little tiny bit. Okay. So make this a little bit bigger. Oh shoot! I don't want to move that. Right there. Right. Yeah. Cool. Make me a little bit bigger. Put me right. Pop up chat, and then we could go. We got unplugged just a little tiny bit. Okay. So make this a little bit bigger. Oh shoot! I don't want to move that. Right there. Right. Yeah. Cool. Okay. So pop up chat, and then we could go. We got unplugged just a little tiny bit. This is the first in a series. Andrew Wilson. Oh shoot! Called Why is Andrew Wilson like that? Yeah. I was thinking a lot about how I think this video pop up on my feed while I was at work, and I was like, "Oh, I should listen to this." This is the I probably know how it's gonna go. Andrew Wilson. And I just thought, I really fucking hate the way that Andrew Wilson like that. It's very childish. It's very pseudo-intellectual to me. And I figured I would just series analyzing his debates and just showing how dumb really that it is. I think that the people that watch it, I don't think that they're laughing at the other person thinking they're getting owned by like a really dumb debate tactic. I think that they think he's super smart and he's just dumb. Like absolutely crushing these people. I think that. And so I want to. I don't think he needs to laughing at the other person thinking they're getting owned by like a really dumb. Oh, my stream is, but I can't hear it. That's weird. Is my. Oh, what's going on here? Usually I would catch that right away, but although. Huh. My headphone's not working. One second. I think you're catching that though. Let's see if that fixes it. I put it back in its case and took it back out. Oh, it sounds like shit. Hang on. What the fuck? You're get out of there. Go. Hey, get out of there, pup. You're not supposed to be under there. Thank you. She always wants to be underneath whatever I have my stuff set up on. I'm going to switch to these ones. I know I brought them in. Nice to see you, Xander. Yeah, back to back. Try to do more streaming. They got fuck else to do. Hello, pup. Okay, can I hear anything now? Oh, this is so weird. I was just listening to Alex O'Connor on Destiny a few minutes ago. And everything was fine. Oh, that's weird. Tell it, pup. Let's chill. Oh my gosh. I can't hear none of that. Huh. Oh. Okay, well, there's that part. Properties. Oh, I wonder if I think about it. Yeah. Let's see. Can I hear now? No. What is happening? Okay. So I can hear that, so I just gotta switch it here. This is very weird. I never have issues like this. Okay.
Rights that...
Cool. Okay. Bit of a bumpy start. So yeah. As I was saying, I really hate how Andrew Wilson debates. And I was thinking about that today because I saw this video pop up on my feed. I almost listened to it at work, and I was like, you know what? This gives me a good idea for a stream series. And it had super bad audio, so I would say that it's probably not very watchable. But Andrew Wilson's one of the first people I debated in the space, if not the first. There was like an actual debate, and he like 3v1 me. He had like two people who would just hop in whenever they felt like it, and he got me on literally nothing. We went all the way down the pre-axiomatic rabbit hole, and he got me on literally nothing, declared that I was insane, and then left. Which, with Andrew Wilson, is about as good as you can get, I think. So, I mean, he doesn't really stake out positions that he can be proven wrong, and he's always super vague and uses like very basic philosophy to avoid having any strong positions. So with that, I'm gonna check out his newest one, and then I'll go and find some other ones as well, and just try to talk about how he's doing what he's doing, and try to figure out why he's like that.
Government enshrined protections are not real. Rights that as we know them, are just things that we recognize as things of value to us. So for instance, I usually define it as simply, you have a right to speak freely. If you're in the middle of the woods and you're buck naked, you can say whatever you want. You have a right to keep and bear arms. Pick up a stick, sharpen it, pointy stick, you can defend yourself. Ain't no one going to stop you. The question is, when you get into conflict with someone else, where is that line drawn? So the reality is, rights are recognized as things that we can and must do to survive and maximize potential.
I think rights are force, and I think that...
You think rights are force?
Government
rights are
protections.
What do you mean rights are
You're
force?
talking about government protections.
No, I'm talking about period. I'll explain what I mean. A right, to me, is an entitlement absent duty. That's a right. Okay, you're entitled to it, but you have no duty.
What does that mean?
It means that you have it. So, like, okay,
entitlement to speak.
Yeah. So if you have a right to own a gun,
to speak.
No, hang on. Let me finish. If you have a right to own a gun, do you have a duty to own a gun?
But do you have a duty to speak?
No, you don't have a duty to speak.
If you have a right to vote, do you have a duty to vote?
So right, so it would be an entitlement.
That's your argument.
It's an entitlement,
but
absent a duty.
But you can speak.
Yeah, you can.
And so
until you...
Okay. Maybe I don't know. He's actually being pretty straightforward here, and I don't understand what Tim Pool's not understanding. I didn't expect this on the first one.
You can't.
The question
until somebody stops you with force.
So you're talking about government restrictions are made up by us as a people.
Just people can adhere to your rights without...
I don't think... What's he confused about? Why did he post this?
Any form of government. If you're walking down the street and you speak, and a guy turns around and smacks you in the mouth and breaks your jaw, right? He has now used force against whatever this right you think you have to speak. You have no right to do shit except whatever you can enforce. Right. Your mechanism is force, and the mechanism against you is force. And so all rights are is force.
You're talking about government protections, not rights.
No, I'm talking about rights. What is...
Rights are not force. Rights are... they're only enforceable. They're only protected by force, but they're not force. That's a weird way to try to stitch them together.
It's a right.
So it is an intrinsic moral function.
Well, okay,
or
intrinsic meaning what?
It means if again, I'll try to explain. If you're born and you live in the middle of the woods, there are things you can do. You can hunt for food. You can defend yourself. You can speak freely. Now, what we've done in the United States
Unless
is
you're born blind and you can't talk, right? Then where does your right to speak come from?
you lack the ability to speak,
Right.
but you still have the means by which you are allowed to do it.
Yeah, but what makes it an intrinsic right to be able to do? Like, where does this idea come?
This seems like a really bad example. Tim Pool is, it's really dumb.
From other than you axiomatically kind of just
Evolution?
say,
I'm impressed, but oh, wow. 2 minutes and 20 seconds in, he said axiomatic. Generally speaking, Andrew likes to take his debates into like the most presuppositional axiomatic layer that he can possibly get to. Because I think it's just because people aren't used to it. And most people don't know how to navigate away from it.
you say because I can do something, I have the right to do something?
It's part of a evolutionary biological structure
So
that resulted in the survival of humanity.
So if I like grab a spear and I can stab somebody with it, I have a right to?
No, that's
Why?
that's attacking somebody. That's violating.
Yeah, but other
that's a
than
whole
an
bunch-
axiom of you shouldn't do that because I just don't feel like you should, what makes it intrinsic that I don't do that?
Wow, he went from like making a pretty good argument, like, and then immediately jumped to axiomatic. It's 40 seconds ago, I was like, I guess he doesn't have to do that, but he still did it.
that you don't go and kill another person.
Yeah.
So the way I view rights would be things that, and again, there's a debate over what rights are.
Yeah, let's start with that. What are they?
No. So there, it's honestly difficult to define,
Yeah.
but it is certain moral structures.
This is another thing that he does. He likes to muddy up the conversation as much as possible as well. You don't have to be very good at tracking a conversation to do what he's doing. In fact, it works really well if you're not, because you just have to follow the last thing you said. As long as you can keep them down in the mud, they really don't have any way to circle back. As long as he keeps on muddying it over and over and over again, they'll never end up circling back to things that were said before. Not that I think that he had to do that, because the look on Tim Pool's face right now says everything you need to know about where he's at. And for the record, I would say that rights are all extensions of your bodily autonomy. You have every single person has the capacity for autonomy over their own body. You can move it, you can make it function, and every right I think that you have extends from that. Everything outside of that, I would say, is a privilege granted by somebody not exerting force on you, or some system not exerting force on you. We usually take that several steps farther, but that's where I would put rights into, and that's also what I used against Andrew Wilson, and he had a very hard time trying. He tried really hard to debunk that and break that down, and he could not. And he said I was insane and left.
Or
I would say axioms. Would you agree with that? Just an axiom. So, like, you have inalienable rights from God according to the Constitution. This is an axiomatic principle. It means this is our philosophical starting point, is that we have these.
I would put it as things that were required or greatly beneficial to the survival of an individual.
That's bad.
We greatly benefit.
Andrew's gonna hop all over the greatly beneficial part. I
agree. We benefit. I just don't know what makes them intrinsic, or like you're born with them, or something like this. Other than we just kind of agree to it.
So I think the restrictions we kind of agree to, and some people might view some things as rights and other things not as rights. Like the left thinks.
Are those magic cards on his shelf? It looks like he has magic cards on this shelf.
Healthcare is a human right, which makes literally no sense.
No sense.
But in terms of your ability to speak, you can walk around, you can speak. To defend yourself, you can pick up a stick, you can defend yourself.
But this goes back to the same argument. I can grab a spear and murder somebody. I can do that. Why don't I have a right to do that?
Because you are now causing harm to another person.
Sorry, this is very distracting. It looks like they are. Oh no, he's friends with the quartering. That makes sense. The quartering is the boogeyman of Magic the Gathering. He's not allowed to play in any sanctioned events anymore.
Person, which is a
Yeah,
detriment.
but why is that valuable?
Why are other people valuable?
Yeah, well, why would that be an intrinsic value? So, like, I can
one would result in the end of humanity, and one results in the expansion of humanity.
Well, no,
What?
both can result in the expansion of humanity.
Right, but absolutely not. You're completely wrong.
No, I'm completely right.
You are wrong. Self-defense can result in expansion.
This is bad. This for the first debate I'm looking at of his. Tim has no business debating
Of
anybody
humanity
on
if
anything.
you're using destruction for the purpose of ending something that is destructive. But if you are wantonly going around murdering people, you're actively reducing.
Did he say if you're using destruction?
Expansion of humanity.
Right, but absolutely not. You're completely wrong.
No, I'm completely right.
You are wrong. Self-defense can result in expansion of humanity if you're using destruction for the purpose of ending something that is destructive.
Okay.
But if you are
That's fine.
wantonly going around murdering people, you're actively reducing and harming humanity.
Well, okay, but that
Maybe
doesn't
not one
mean it doesn't
example.
expand humanity by harming people. There's
So
nations
the argument
that
of
do this all the
self-defense
time.
is there are things that we believe we must be able to do for the betterment and survival of humanity.
Yeah, but when I'm asking you this question, right? I'm asking the foundation from which you say I have the right to speak or write.
We
or
need to be able to in
things like
order to
this.
survive.
You don't need to speak
because
to
you
survive.
need to do something.
So
I'm not sure how that means you have a right to it, though.
Okay, so speech is not
Like you have
just
to
saying
eat.
words.
You have
Speech
a
is-
right to eat.
Yes, 100%.
Really? You have a right to do that?
Why would you
Yes,
not
you don't have a right to own
do
So
that?
if I had,
but you have a right to eat, otherwise you'll die.
Yeah.
I don't understand.
Do you have a right to breathe? What about breathing?
These are good questions, right?
Again, I don't think you understand. We're talking about
Oh.
intrinsic behaviors that are required for survival versus the government.
That was interesting. She just tested him, but Andrew hasn't said past the very beginning. He hasn't circled back to what rights are, so now I don't think he's gonna. I would assume, based on everything I've seen of him, he's probably not going to reiterate his position on rights, because now all he has to do is exploit the fact that Tim doesn't have a solid definition for it. So when she just asked, "Do you have a right to breathe?" he just says, "That's a good question." She tested his definition, at least in theory. I don't know if that's what she was trying to do, but she did put out a test for his definition, and he didn't answer. He just said, "That's a good question."
Government and humans deciding what we shouldn't have
I
in
don't think
law.
Because he's trying to focus on. He's keeping Tim in the hot seat because he already knows that Tim doesn't have a functional definition of what a right is.
Speaking past each other, I'm asking what makes them intrinsic. When you say I have a right to eat, okay?
If you don't, you'll die.
If you have if that guy has all the food over there, you no longer have a
We
right
are
to
not
eat.
talking about your right to steal from others. If you
Yeah,
are
so you
standing
no longer
in
have
the
a right
woods
to-
by if you're standing in the woods by yourself, eat that mushroom.
Okay, got it. You can eat the mushroom.
Uh-huh.
But what makes it a right to eat that mushroom, and what makes it not a right for a guy standing next to the mushroom to say,
Again, we're
I have a
talking
gun
about laws.
and I don't want you
Wait,
to
hold
eat
on.
that mushroom?
You're now once again talking about laws and restrictions.
Yeah, okay, but my whole theory is that rights themselves are force, and that's all they
did
ever
bring it
are.
back.
It's just
Okay,
your
okay.
ability to use force to do thing you want to do.
I think you're just making
you call
an
that a
argument
right.
I call rights things that are essential to the survival of humanity.
So you have a right to your heart beating and your blood flowing and to blink and to.
Yes.
Okay, so if you
So
just
now you misunderstand because once again you're talking about government again.
how is this government? It doesn't need to be
Yeah, it
If
doesn't
you are
make any
standing in the
sense.
middle of the woods and your heart is beating, your heart has a right to beat. If your heart fails and you die, you died.
That right there, yeah. He's starting to get it. He's circling in on bodily autonomy now, which I would agree with. I wonder if he'll be able to flesh that out.
You're
I don't
making an
think so.
argument that someone should or should not be allowed to do something is an entirely human social construct.
I agree.
Right. I'm saying that the reason we have protections of rights is because we've determined certain things are required for the reasonable survival and expansion of humanity.
I
These
agree. We
things-
agree to those things, and we act as though they're rights.
And the Bill of Rights,
but I don't think rights themselves exist.
The Bill of Rights is a recognition of certain things that we do for the betterment of survival that must be protected from government. Now, if you want to argue the amendments in the Bill of Rights are nonsensical, fine. If you want to have a moral argument or philosophical argument about what is required or intrinsic to the survival of humanity, by all means have that argument. But rights do exist. It just means some you might not agree with and some you might think aren't. Those are philosophical debates.
Exist.
Yeah, but when you say exist,
your own bodily
right?
autonomy.
Do you mean outside of your brain they exist, or do they only exist as a construction of your mind where you say, I have a right to do X?
If we observe creatures in the wild, we will see them required to do things to survive.
Yeah, okay, so
if you inhibit those things, they will die.
So if just rights
protect
to you,
those things.
So the rights to you just mean things which are a requirement for your existence?
And typically we define them as such because they transcend the basic obvious things like breathing and drinking water.
Owning a gun isn't a requirement to your existence.
No, defending yourself is.
Yeah, but
if a bear comes and you're in the middle of the woods and you don't have the ability to defend yourself, you cease to exist and humans cease to exist. So humans do defend themselves. Then as human society, we've decided this should be protected, otherwise humans will cease to exist.
Yeah, but why? Okay, but this makes no sense, right? So if all right is to you, Tim, is thing X which is necessary for the survival of a man, in this case blinking and breathing and eating and pooping and whatever, the right to poop shall not be under, because you have a right to do that because it's like something you need to do to be alive.
Right, but you can't poop on someone's floor.
Why couldn't you extend that to literally everything? You need healthcare to survive. You need guns to survive. You need a house to survive. You need everything to survive.
I think we should move on, but I think the challenge is, I don't know if
one of the key features of the way that Andrew Wilson debates is that he, generally at least, he seemed to do a good job this time of putting forth a strong argument in the beginning, but he will generally focus on the other person's, anything that the other person's lacking on, and just focus on that. How do I want to word this? He has a lot more care for the appearance of winning rather than having any kind of real conversation or any kind of real dialogue that moves the conversation forward. I think it's all about making the other person look bad. Which is still, in this, it's following pretty well.
If you're unwilling to understand or what... You have no right to take other things from other people, to take their labor. You have no right to force a doctor to perform surgery on you, but you certainly have a right to ask him for it.
Those are just assertions. Like, you just assert these things as though they have a grounding epistemic foundation from which you can make the assertion. Based on where do you make the assertion that you're not allowed to do X other than because Tim Pool's preference is that you don't?
And I'm literally saying you're talking about laws and social order right now, not human behaviors for survival.
I think human behaviors are laws and social orders. I think that's this. You're saying the same thing.
No, if a person was in the middle of the woods, they'd be foraging and looking for food.
Yeah, what does that have to do with what I just said?
You're talking about what the government can and can't do. I'm talking about what humans need to do to survive.
Yeah, okay. Well, humans also have to have other humans around to survive.
Well, if nothing else, this serves as a proof that I do not vet videos before I watch them. He's sassy like a high school girl. He is. It's just so unfortunate that this is a pretty good example of him actually doing very well in a debate, but it's not because of him. I wouldn't say it's just Tim's so fucking stupid.
And so this is communication is essential. The right to defend yourself is essential. The right to secure your possessions is essential. These things, without them, humans cease to function properly. And then you get the Soviet bloc, you get starvation, you get genocide.
Without humans, none of that stuff happens without humans.
Detriment
it's a function of our belief system in the United States that we have natural rights. I mean,
I agree with that.
That's a huge part of it.
I agree with that. I agree with that, that in the United States we agree that we have them.
I think you can
not
say that
sure
everyone,
that we do.
I think that you can say that everyone has these rights, and it's a function of whether or not their government allows the rights to be recognized.
That's the contention. When you say, I think everybody has these rights.
Yeah, that is my belief.
Yeah, it's a belief.
Yeah.
When you talk about your rights in context of a government, they are what the government itself will protect by force of its citizens to be able to do. That's all that means in the context of government.
Based on...
At least what the government says it will protect your right or your ability to do.
Based on existence. I mean,
based on just
you know,
your preferences.
So there's
I don't think it's a preference. I think everyone has a right to breathe. And
and you do. In the big picture of what are the list of fundamental rights that exist to humans, cultures debate these things wildly, but there are a small handful which are true and correct. If inhibited, a person dies.
Agreed. But what I'm saying, I guess my overarching point, and I can just kind of tie
Or
it off
society
with this,
fails.
is that when I say rights are forced, what I'm saying is the thing that you say is necessary, breathing, eating, these types of things. I think that those things, which you call rights, really are just force. You're saying I will use force in order to do this thing that I want to do to necessarily exist. And that another person can use force to stop.
They're only protected by force. The right to breathe, it's like the right to breathe, it doesn't make any sense for him to say that, because he should just be saying you have the right to your own bodily autonomy. This is intrinsic. This is a statement of fact. You do have the right to your own bodily autonomy. You have that right because you can enact it no matter what. Even if somebody is trying to force you not to, you still have the right to resist that by exercising your bodily autonomy. But to say that rights are not force, rights are only guaranteed. Yeah, always with the might is right. Yeah, rights are only guaranteed when they are backed up by force. Sure, save for your bodily autonomy. Which is why we think of like the worst crimes anybody can possibly commit: murder, rape, enslavement. These are all affronts to your bodily autonomy. Even like the right to choose, which it was probably for a lot of people, having that taken away is probably up there with those other things as well. And I would say that these things are pretty universally seen the same way, because I think that at a certain layer, people know that the right to your own bodily autonomy supersedes everything. And I would just take it another step further and say that all rights that we have would extend from that.
Stop those things from existing.
And then you can use force to stop them.
Right, and then you can use force, et cetera, et
Because you have a
cetera.
right to
But all we're
self-defense.
really doing is just moving the goalpost of force around, right? So if this group says this group does not have the right to breathe, they do not have the right to eat, they do not have the right to do any of this shit, and they go and put a stop to it,
But you don't,
what
but
are
that
we
group-
appealing to for
but that
why it
group
is that you
doesn't-
can't do that?
That group doesn't have the right to do
Yeah,
that.
but that makes no sense.
Like
Why
you're
wouldn't they
saying-
have the
you're
right
saying-
to do that?
I feel
you're
like
saying might makes right, which is a
well, it's
perspective.
beyond that.
You
I think you're
called it
making a
makes.
postmodernist argument for why you should be allowed to do things that other people don't want you to do.
I think I think the opposite is
Yes.
true.
I'm making.
I would use a justification of God, and I would appeal to something which is unchanging and an unchanging standard for moral justifications for oughts. But what you're doing when you say a right and you're appealing to like the Constitution, that's postmodernist subjective standards of nonsense, right? It's just like
No, it's moral
we all
foundation.
decided that we have these rights, so we do. There's no justification for any of them.
So
Zero.
you don't believe in any intrinsic moral foundations?
No, I do believe in intrinsic moral foundations and epistemic justifications and ontological justifications, which would come from God.
I
These
think
would
you're
be-
doing deconstructivist reasoning to argue why.
It's just basic philosophy. It has nothing to do with deconstruction or postmodernism.
That's-
Basic philosophy, you have to have a
He just gave the whole game away. Andrew Wilson's entire debate plan in all debates is just basic philosophy. And that's pretty much what I plan on seeing from him throughout the entire series. It's basic philosophy that, for some reason, people that he talks to have a ridiculously hard time grasping, and he exploits that.
justification for a position.
And when I've given you one, you just reject it every
Yeah,
time.
well,
You just say,
because
nope,
because
nope.
they're
Too cool, it's
axiomatic. So
beyond
you
stupid.
haven't demonstrated why the axiom or the starting point. We start with rights, Andrew. You haven't demonstrated why we do, other than
You die.
because I observe that if we don't act in this way, you expire. But it's like, okay, but why is that even bad? Like, why is that even a bad thing?
Why is it bad that humans cease to exist?
Yeah, why would that even be a bad thing from the worldview of rights? Like,
Now he's doing it too. He's bringing it back to the presuppositional axiomatic justification.
oh, okay, if you don't have this
That is always his strategy. Always, no matter what.
right, you die. But you haven't justified why that's even a bad thing.
Because humans exist through a pattern of evolution towards, or creation, whichever you decide, for to be fruitful. to bear fruit, and etc. These things are components of creation and life.
The reason that he does that is because he can lean on God then. Any presuppositional argument, if you say you can claim objective morality by believing in God, and you can make a whole bunch of presuppositional truth claims if you just lean on God. And I think I don't have any reason to believe or disbelieve that he's a Christian, but it makes it very, very convenient for him in every conversation that he likes to use this tactic, where he can just fall back on God every time. The new job's really good. I particularly like it because no matter when we end the day, I get paid for 8 hours, which is nice. If I have to come in late, it's fine. And I'm super used to it. I'm just pulling cables. Right now it's a lot of audio cables, less Cat 6, more audio cables. And apparently at this place, we don't ever use ladders. It's always scissor lifts, which is nice. He's always able to go back to the Lord's instructions. Yeah. Just kind of things that you can extrapolate. If there's a creator, then he gives you this. So therefore, everything I say is right, and I don't have to justify any of my presuppositional axioms because they're all based on God. And if you don't have some kind of mystical fairy tale to base your shit on, then you have to just concede that all of your axioms are just things that we've kind of agreed upon, which is the truth of the matter anyways. And so is what he's saying as well.
I think...
So basically, if you want to beat Andrew Wilson in a debate, you have to debunk God. That's why he used this tactic. Because it's not about furthering the intellectual progress of the discussion. It's about making the other person look bad. Used to cabling, I'm pretty flexible, so I was the roof monkey. I don't like running cables on the roof. They always have to get reran.
This aligns perfectly with like a Christian, Judeo-Christian moral worldview. And I think these things are requirements for the efficient expansion and fruitfulness of humans. So they are natural, either from an evolutionary standpoint, humans developed to inhibit
I will say though, one of the ways that you can combat what he said is to say what I said. All rights are an extension of your bodily autonomy because it is self-evident. Nobody else can control your body. You can control your body. So it is self-evident. And it can't be debated. It's not, it's as pretty axiomatic up to, like, I think that I exist in the way that I perceive myself to exist. After you get past that, then you have the right to your own bodily autonomy.
Certain requirements to function efficiently. And when these things are curtailed, we see inefficiency and collapse.
And if you don't have that, then the word right means nothing at all.
Humans developed to inherit certain requirements to function efficiently. And when these things are curtailed, we see inefficiency and collapse, disease, and chaos.
This is circular. So you go, okay, we need to bear fruit.
That's rich for him to say it's circular, but if you tell Andrew Wilson that his argument is circular, he will tell you what's wrong with that, and then explain why your thing is ultimately circular because you're relying on unjustifiable presuppositions as well.
Fruit and multiply. Why? Well, because then we can exist. Why do we need to exist? Because then we can bear fruit and multiply. Okay, but why? Because then we can exist.
You're just being contrarian for no reason.
No, it's not contrarian. I'm giving you a real principle.
You believe in God?
Yeah, I'm a Christian.
So if I say God gives you...
I guarantee you through this, we are going to see Andrew Wilson claim that his logic is circular and that it's fine. We have to sell our labor through, though. So where's the bodily autonomy in that? I can explain that. So, I think the word sell here is inappropriate. We trade our autonomy for other things, which is why I would say that the right to property is an extension of your bodily autonomy. I exchange some of my autonomy for money, and so the things that I spend my money on are an extension of my autonomy. I have chosen to use my body in this way for these means, and these means now are an extension of that autonomy. So if you try to take my stuff, you're infringing on my autonomy. If that makes sense. I think all rights that I would defend would be an extension of your own autonomy. And that's like you can think of trading your autonomy as like it's like, pardon me, it's like the moral currency that we all have. Which is why like the other things aren't like the rape, murder, enslavement. These are complete shutdowns and theft of autonomy. These are seen as the worst crimes. And then like right below that, we have things like theft or assault. These are things that are partial assaults on our autonomy. And we see these as particularly egregious, probably one tier below that.
A mandate. So when God says has a mandate to be fruitful and multiply, do you say yes or no?
Yo, of course.
Are there certain characteristics and behaviors that result in benefit and in more efficient, fruitful multiplying?
Of course.
Aren't the, so are
That's
those
divine, but this is, hang on, this is divine command, justification from divine command. It has nothing to do with libertarian nonsense of constitutional egalitarianism.
I think instead of having a discussion on the merits of what rights might mean, you're instead upset over what libertarians think rights might mean as opposed to what I'm actually trying to say.
Okay, well, do you justify rights as coming from God?
You can never, ever, if it's not like you have a choice in the matter, you have to sell your labor. Kind of. We certainly exist in a system where in order to do things, I would say that we created a system where we exchange our autonomy for usually money, but this leads to a better experience overall. I mean, really, you can go and live off the grid and live off the land. You go somewhere where there's nobody at and you can live that way. But it's better to be in the system where you can trade your autonomy in much more comfortable ways to have an overall better experience. That's why almost everybody chooses that, because it's almost unthinkable to live off the grid and solely rely on a direct product of autonomy. I'm in Michigan. Previously, I used to say like kind of in the Detroit area. Now, like I'm like literally like neighboring Detroit. Sometimes Google Maps thinks I'm in Detroit.
Odd.
Yes.
Okay, great.
I think I might literally. I think the other side of the street might be Detroit.
Well, then we're fine there. But so I think we actually agree. So then, if that is the case, if whatever you think rights are come from God, then whatever else we're appealing to external to God for where a right comes from isn't really a right, right?
What did I tell you? I fucking told you. He gave the game away again. He can always rely on God to justify his axioms, and there is almost nothing else that you can do to justify your axioms, unless you take my route, which is claiming bodily autonomy. I'm pretty sure that those are like the only two ways to claim objective rights at all. I would say that the objectiveness of bodily autonomy of my argument are weaker once you get past the original. Like when I talk about how money is an extension of your bodily, or like your labor is an extension of your bodily autonomy, which you trade, which which carries the moral value of your autonomy. It's not quite as objective as just being able to solely rely on God, but he's telling you how he does it right now.
It's not really a right.
I think that
he does this all the time because it's it reminds me of like when a kid figures out how tic-tac-toe is solved, and you know that you either win or it's a tie every time once you know it. So he just relies on these arguments because either way, like he can't lose anything. It'll either be a draw or he'll win, which just, it makes it so frustrating that people see him as like an intellectual on the right.
Life, goodness, creation, there is deep overlap. I think a simple way to look at it is, yin yang, within good there is some evil, within evil there is some good. Mm-hmm. And a way to explain that is sometimes we have to destroy to create. What does that mean? If there's a mass murderer who's murdering children, we don't want to, but we stop that person to defend ourselves and others' lives. I think that there is divine mandate that we...
I just want to point out, do you see how if Tim Pool took the bodily autonomy argument, we could kill that person for violating the bodily autonomy of others? Oh yeah, the one little end piece on my thing is that the only way to forfeit your bodily autonomy is to infringe on somebody else's.
We must, be fruitful, multiply. We are here to organize, to create. There's a secular way of looking at it. It's evolution that developed us to this point where we have internalized these things that we must do, or that result in a more efficient way of life. Or more simply, there is a God, there is a divine structure and mandate which results in certain things that are beneficial to mankind that I would describe as good and just, and there are things that are evil and unjust.
So as we get to the...
He was kind of close with the God thing. Tim Pool just said he thinks that there's a divine mandate. Yeah, but he did it wrong. He said that it is good because no. If you believe in a divine mandate, it is good because God is good. Anything that God commands is good because that is the definition of what is good. There is no anything after that. It is good to be fruitful and multiply solely because God said it's good. That is the only way that the God argument works.
Heart of it then, right here, where we come to this agreement, where I reject this, is that I think all the things you just stated are duties. They're duties, they're the opposite of rights. You have a duty.
I just think we're having a semantic argument.
Well, but semantics are super important so we don't speak past each other. So when I say a duty...
Semantics are super important because he wants to force you to use his language so that he can trap you in this axiomatic tree. There is no subjective good yet. Correct. If you take the God argument, all morality is objective because God declares it. Full stop. There's nothing else.
It's an obligation to do a thing based on the fact that you're commanded to, in this case by God. A right, I would say, is an entitlement absent duty. So if that's the case, what you're listing out is like God is giving us these duties to do. I'm not sure what rights he's giving you.
I'm saying there are certain behaviors that God...
Yeah, he does. He has to play the semantic game. If you're able to use a different language, then he can't reject everything you're saying by rooting it in this religious presuppositional rabbit hole that he likes to go down. Or I guess more of a tree, really. Presuppositional logic tree. He's a lot like Darth Dawkins like this.
That there are certain behaviors, there are certain functions of life that are a component of God's divine plan mandate, and I could argue it in a secular.
What if you disagree with God says? It's a very interesting question because you're supposing that there is a God. When you say that, then I guess you would have to reject, you just have to reject God outright then, right? Or what the idea of a Christian God would be.
Way for people who don't believe in God or whatever.
Sure.
There's a natural structure of the universe that says to humans, be fruitful and multiply.
I don't think it makes very much sense to disagree. If you think God commands something and then to disagree with it, speaking in like Abrahamic God, but it would make sense to reject God.
And these things are important for the efficient structure of such.
Thanks for watching this clip from Timcast IRL. Make sure to check out the live show Monday through Friday.
Tim Pool's a fucking retard. Okay. God, I hated that. Let's see. Oh my! This is one of my. I hated this debate so much. I might go to that one. It looks like I stopped watching it before the end. Satan did it. Well, sure, but he didn't disagree with God. So he was rejecting God. God is the Word. So the Word of God is God. Don't fuck with me on this. I'm a huge religion buff. Religion's probably my best subject of academic subjects. I would say in order, I like religion, philosophy, and then politics. That would be in order. I disregard what he says. My morals stem from values around harm and freedom, etc. I think that you could probably reduce that down to bodily autonomy. If you break down where those values around harm and freedom come from, I think what you're actually defending is going to very likely be your bodily autonomy. Let's see. Oh, I thought that was Mr. Beast. I was really confused. That guy looks a lot like Mr. Beast. Oh my god, so many of them from whatever. Alright. Oh, this one looks good. I like to push the Destiny one back a little bit because I've already seen it. Moses struck the rock.
Been advocating that because you cannot draw an exact distinction, the point in which man becomes woman and woman becomes man, they're not any longer in separate categories. Wow. That's the most insane shit I've ever heard in my life.
It also doesn't hold water.
There's a fallacy for this. It's called the continuum fallacy. It's a fallacious form of argumentation. It's like,
I'm sorry, I gotta take my shoes off. That's I'm walking off camera for a second.
Because I cannot draw distinctions. All dogs have fur. Well, so do cats. All dogs have tails. Well, so do cats. All dogs have eyeballs. Well, so do cats. Clearly, cats and dogs are in a different category. But can you tell me the exact point in which there's a delineation? If you can't, then they must be the same thing. It's completely fallacious. But this is the kind of interchangeable ideology which leftist progressives have brought us and that we're currently dealing with.
What is your background?
Oh, yeah, I argued this the other night. It's essentially not doing things you wouldn't want done to you and doing things you want others to be able to do, etc. Sure, I think when... so if you're going to do something to somebody else, we would see it as good only if there's either like direct permission or there's an implied permission. We operate a lot on implied permission. There's things that people generally don't like, but the implied permission can be denied by somebody just voicing it like, hey, I don't want you to do that, and now it's no longer okay for you to do that. There's like a handful of things, like I would say there's some degree of touching, like shoulder or like arm to some degree you can do to people that is widely accepted to be okay, and that if you tried to like if you got defensive or upset with somebody without putting them on notice that you're not okay with that happening, you're probably going to be seen as the person who's acting out of line. So there's like I would say pretty decent group of things in this implied permission area. We have an implied permission to interact with somebody else's bodily autonomy. With like a pretty broad range of things, but outside of that, you have to get their permission because it's all bodily autonomy.
So let me just start with this. One of the things that I found I started listening to little clips on that podcast with those.
Although, full disclosure is the right word. I'll be totally upfront and say that the whole bodily autonomy argument, I'm sure somebody's made this claim before, but this is sort of what I figured on my own. So it's very possible that somebody could poke holes in this. I just haven't ran into anybody who's poked holes in it yet. But if you guys know of somebody who's smarter and more well studied than me that has talked about it, let me know so that way I can get more informed on what a greater mind has come up with in this regard. Or B, if you think you have any way to poke holes in that, in my argument, I encourage you to challenge it, because I'd like to be able to see what kind of ideas could butt up against it or threaten it. Because if I can't defend it, then I probably need to get rid of it.
Gals, all those OnlyFans girls, and I noticed that you knew exactly why.
I didn't know he spoke with me either, and I can't place this guy. He looks super, super, super familiar to me. Why do I know him? If you know who he is, tell me why I know this guy.
You stood where you stood, and you were so consistent logically with the platform that you were defending. And then I watched you on Dave Smith.
Andrew Wilson is logically consistent, but he uses the same. It's because he uses the same argument for like everything.
And it was so obvious that your point of view, your philosophy, your moral philosophy, your political philosophy has been stress tested from every different angle. And Dave, smart.
He has a comedy podcast. He's on Joe Rogan's a lot. Brennan Schwab, Brian Collins. Is he a stand-up comedian then? If he's a stand-up comedian, that's what I thought when I first saw him. I like stand-up comedy even more than I like learning about religion. It's probably one of my favorite things in the whole world.
Guy, I know Dave, like Dave very much, but Dave, I think, missed the point.
Like, I would believe that I've seen him in an old Comedy Central Presents or something like that.
Of your example, which was incest, which was if a brother and sister are having sex and nobody's being harmed. This is the Jonathan Haidt example. If a brother and sister are in the woods having sex and nobody is there to see it, but they're using protection, is it wrong? And if you ask usually people who have high level...
He has a small role in the Hangover movies too. Oh,
levels of education, tend to come from affluent backgrounds. Your average academic, for example, your average leftist or liberal, they will say, well, it's not hurting anybody, so I guess it's not wrong. But if you ask the majority of Americans, you ask most people who tend to be, whether they're conservative or traditional or right-leaning, whatever it might be, and we should define those, they tend to say things like, look, I don't know how to define that it's wrong, but it elicits a sense of disgust in me. There is something that violates the sanctity of the human experience. And where does that come from? And I thought that was, and Dave just kept missing the reason you were using that extreme example. It was very, very important to use that example, because you've got to know why you stand where you stand, and you've got to know what lines to defend, right? I mean, is that a fair characterization of what I was watching?
Yeah, so this is what you're talking about is an internal critique which is done in the libertarian worldview. And so the expression essentially operates this way. So me, I'm a Christian. My entire ethical worldview comes and is sealed, right? It's monolithically sealed inside of that Christian ethic. So when I do an internal critique, or an internal critique is done on my worldview, you have to have answers for all of these questions in order to remain logically consistent. Libertarians do not. They seem to have an issue with these things morally, and yet when they try to move into a governance position, they're completely impotent and ineffective, because they're not allowed to express their morality onto the population, even though the population's demanding that they do so. It's a really, really bad ideology for libertarians to have. So you are correct. And also to kind of piggyback off of your example of most Americans, most Americans don't like incest. They, you know what I mean? They don't want.
He always says internal critique. Yeah, he does. I think the reason he says that is because he can lean on. It's just because he can lean on God. I think what he's getting at there is that you have to rely on an internal critique, but he doesn't actually have to, because he has God to save him from all that shit. It's very frustrating.
Well, they respect sanctity, they respect loyalty, they respect authority when it's backed by competence. Yeah.
Well, I'll give you a kind of a piggyback here, which is interesting. I'm sure you've heard of the trolley cart problem, right?
No.
No, boy.
Okay, well, the trolley cart problem is just a basic philosophical problem, which is asking this question. If you're in a trolley cart and you have to divert the track, and if it goes left, it kills one person. If it goes right, it kills 5 people. Do you throw the lever? Right? So this is just asking a basic question about consequences. Would most people throw the lever to only kill the one person versus the 5? Probably they would. But here's where it gets interesting. if you ask that same question to people and say, okay, you're with a friend and you're on top of a bridge and you can push the friend in front of the trolley cart and save everybody in front of the trolley cart, all the people who answer one still answer no, that they would not do that. Even though it's the same, right? It's the same thing. You're only killing one person ultimately.
Right.
But when the situation is just slightly modified, the answer changes, which gives you some insight into people's kind of moral beliefs and their moral consistency. And you're totally right when it comes to the Dave argument.
I don't know. I don't know if he's actually going to debate in this. Actually, that's fine. Because I want to know why Andrew Wilson's like that. So
he completely misses the idea of what is ownership. When we're talking about ownership, is there a cultural context to this? When we're talking about morality, are we just using cultural relativism, or are we moving to something which is higher, like divine command? Dave says, well, I believe in divine command. Well, then how can you argue with me?
Well, Dave believes in a feeling. So what you got him backed into is he said, I since I've had children, I have a feeling that it's wrong, and I believe that feeling is rooted in something like God. To which you then said, well, then you do have a Christian point of view on this, or at least a divine point of view on this. You know, and my argument also, Andrew, is like, if you look at the way our first of all, I believe it's crucial to have a transcendent truth. I think being orientated around and toward a singular, an ultimate, a transcendent truth that is apart from man is crucial. Without that, we
I think this guy believes it. I think just for Andrew, it's extremely convenient to be Christian.
create our own gods, and history is an example of that.
I'm actually super curious. I don't know if I've ever heard Andrew talk about his like relationship with God, which would be really weird. How much he espouses Christianity, and not hear him talk about like his personal relationship with God.
You create your own piety towards something like called equality, or something called fascism, or whatever. Some ism is you're gonna invent some ism. But what I think people miss is that the notion behind monotheism is that we are all, since there's one Father, that means we're all brothers and sisters, which means we're all of the same moral worth, which is really what our justice system is already predicated on, which means if I kill some heroin addict who's a wretch on the street, or I kill Bill Gates, theoretically in the justice system, they go, you're doing the same amount of time. You're doing life in prison. Or that somebody who's profoundly handicapped or even retarded and
well,
is
it's
in a
supposed
coma.
to work that way anyway.
It's supposed to. It's supposed
Right.
to. But all of us, whether we're atheists or Christians, would, if you went to a bunch of academics and said, well, the person's in a coma, so we killed them, it's no big deal. Even they would say, well, that's not for you to judge. You killed that person, that you made that judgment, that's not for you. You still have to do the time. And that is what isn't that what our justice system is predicated on? It's already a Christian ethic, isn't it?
It is. So most of this came from English common law. And
I don't agree. So I think I've heard Andrew say that before too. Our justice system has similarities with it, but there's a big jump going from that there's similarities to it's based on this. I don't think that that's valid.
it came from judges who were riding circuits. And the judges were riding literally horses in circuits to enforce the common law, because England was a place which was completely overrun with too much law. So because you had so many land barons, you could shoot a deer on property A and it ends up on property B, and you end up getting hung for this. So the judges who enforced the common law, the English common law, rode in circuits all over England, and that's what they did. They enforced it. All of it came from the Christian ethical foundation. That's where common law really derived its meaning from. And yes, here in the United States, we adopted English common law. Our entire justice system is built off of it.
There's plenty of laws that has no basis in Christianity at all. I think this is silly.
So yeah, it's all of it is Christian ethics. There's no
doesn't some
place
of
in the United States you can go where you don't see Christian ethics in force.
Right. But doesn't that also sort of go back to Cicero's law, to Roman law, the idea that there are certain things, a sister has a right to bury her brother, regardless of whether the king says, leave that body out there to, I think I'm talking about Antigone here, leave that body out to rot. Well, no, the most natural thing is to allow a sister to bury her dead brother. That is sort of something that we consider to be a natural, overwhelming, primal need, a human need. Isn't this where all this? So yeah, I guess I'm kind of backing what you said, and I'm always surprised that so many of these people they just don't think it through. And you have to think it through. If you want objective law, you've got to stress test it. Otherwise, you've just got law by man as opposed to law.
Well, I think the biggest mistake that we make, that Christians make, period, is that we have fallen for this great lie that Christians having power and enforcing power and will is somehow evil or against Christian ethics, when indeed it is not. And so what happens instead is we get ruled by secularists who hate us. And they hate everything that we stand for. They hate all the ethical systems which we promote. They loathe it. And so they do everything they can to dismantle it. Half the time they're scoffing and laughing. They mock us openly as much as they possibly can. And I think that the reason that this has happened is we've fallen for kind of a great lie. And the great lie is, Christians, you're not allowed to rule, because that's the most Christian thing you can do, is just to not ever be in power, not ever be in charge, and to be continuously persecuted while society pretends that you're everything that you love. Every kind of tradition that you have is destroyed right in front of you, but then they go, but I'm not touching you. I'm not touching you, though. I'm not touching you.
So he's, maybe it's just me, but it sounds a lot like he's just a crying victim.
You can't do anything. And this is the greatest lie that we fall for. Christians should be in power. There's no reason they shouldn't be in power. They should absolutely be enforcing Christian ethics as a way of life. There's no problem with that. Why are secular ethics superior? Why do we consider secular ethics to be in any way, shape, or form better than Christian ethics? Why? It makes no sense. But what happens is, this is why libertarians, there's kind of I've kind of been at war, let's say, verbal war with libertarians for years over this, because it's stupid. It's stupid to say that the world that we live in is a enforced will. That's what it is. It's will to power. That is what's true. Now, under Christian ethics, we don't think might is right, but we do think that might makes. It does make, whether it makes right or not. That's a different conversation. I don't think it does,
I think the tune is,
but it does make. And so if
take.
you are going to be in a nation and you want to see the Christian ethics that you live by enforced, then you have to have politicians and you have to have people in powerful position who share those ethical systems and are willing to enforce them. Libertarians do everything they can to undermine that, and that's why progressives end up with power. They don't care. I liken it this way. If you were to take a libertarian, a Christian ethicist, and a leftist progressive, and they all found the sword of power, there was one single sword, and it was an all-powerful sword. The libertarian and the Christian ethicist would argue for a while before they agreed, whichever one of us takes a sword, the other one will be able to live side by side. By the time that happens, the progressive has already picked it up, cut you both in half. He's already ruling the world. Okay, that's how it actually works in real time. And so I think it's silly. I think it's silly.
Well, how do you reconcile then the notion?
All right, I don't want to do this. I wanna go to his debates. It's just me learning about him, which isn't as fit for
Tech, are you okay?
me commenting.
Yeah, Trump called people there on January 6th to protest the certification of the vote. He led everybody to believe that certification could be stopped, either with Pence or with enough for.
Unless there's a big disagreement on that, I wouldn't imagine there would be. There's just not a lot I can add. I'm just literally learning about him with that.
supplied, I guess. And as the insurrection was ongoing, Donald Trump was making calls to lawmakers to try to continue to encourage them to delay the certification of the vote. There was a plan in mind the entire time. It was even more extensive than that. But yeah, he was hoping that there'd be a lot of pressure. That's why he called people there on January 6th. It's why he, even when he knew they had guns and stuff, he sent them to the Capitol to go and protest. It's why he said over and over again, stop the steal, fight like hell to take our country back. And it's why when violence started and he watched violence happening on TV and he heard that Ashley Babbitt had been shot, instead of like trying to call people off from being violent, he tried to take advantage of the violence in order to further his scheme of having the vote not certified.
Destiny, good to see you, bro. I'm glad that you're still here with us, man.
This is very frustrating. Better content for sure. Yeah, I think well, I watched the majority of it, and I tweeted out that in this debate, Andrew Wilson showed all the intellectual progress of a 6-year-old saying why for 2 hours. I think that was my takeaway the first time I saw it. The only time I seen it. But I'll be a little bit more thoughtful watching it this time.
Yeah, so barely alive, but I'm still here.
Just a heads up, I can probably go till midnight, and then I gotta sleep for work, and I'll pick up where I left off tomorrow.
Sure, yeah.
Oh, man, dude. Going crazy on Twitter, man. It's crazy.
Oh, Jesus.
Oh, man.
Are you sick? Are you okay?
Yeah, I've had to. I went to the RNC and I just came down with a bug ever since. I sound like all fucking congested and shit.
It's a lot better now, though.
Yeah, it's way better than before. It was worse than this. I went ahead and commingled with all the people you hate.
I feel like with how hardline Andrew Wilson boasts his Christianity as his basis for his belief system, I wonder how he gets away with smoking cigarettes. I feel like that's got to run into issues with how God wants you to live your life. I can't imagine that just respecting your body that way would be okay. Sounds good. Thank you, Mantis.
They made me sick. Destiny.
Nice. Well, that's what happens because they were all
weekend I can go longer.
Oh my.
After I run this series for a few streams, I'll probably come back to that video, and but maybe not on stream, but I might just like Discord watch party it once people are a little more invested in picking this guy apart.
Oh, man.
No, if he was at the RNC, then they probably were all vaxxed, actually.
Yeah, depending on how far you go, yeah, true.
Yeah.
All right, so guys, we'll start at the stream and I'll say, what's up, guys? I'll do a quick little, you know what, man? Honestly, bro, we don't even got to play the intro music or anything like that. We'll just go.
Oh, yeah. I just clicked this and I didn't really see what it was. This has been Destiny debated, Andrew, on January 6th. I also just want to add, I hate calling him Andrew. He's big Papa fascist to me. Still, he always will be. And for the record, I like 100% agree with Destiny on January 6th. I don't have it anymore, but I wrote down a really solid definition of insurrection. I listened to this while I was at work. And because of that, I wrote down a really solid definition for insurrection. Maybe I'll look and see if I tweeted it, because I don't have that piece of paper anymore. But it would be very hard for Andrew to do the stuff that he did with that definition. All-rounder. Lovely to see you, buddy. Let's see. Oh, I just had to hover over your star to see how long you've been a member for, because yours is gold. 6 months. That's what the fuck is up. We're breaking down Andrew Wilson.
Live, and then I'll, you know what I'm saying, do a quick little intro, and then I'll kind of make some quick announcements, then...
Me.
Oh, my camera? Yeah. Just keep it on camera, too, for me. And then we'll be good. All right, that's good. Shout out to Destiny and Andrew Wilson's audience. You guys are seeing like the behind the scenes of how we get ready before a show.
Okay.
Well, I appreciate you, Mom.
Absolutely agree with Big D. I don't know if you saw Tom get in trouble challenging Destiny about not engaging with the state hypothetical after this. I did, and it drove me absolutely bonkers. because it was I could see where Tom wasn't connecting with Destiny on it, and it was how he was wording it. Like I was listening to that at work too, my old job, and I just kept going over and over in my head like Tom just needs to say it like this. Tom just needs to say it like this, because it was really glaring to me what the disconnect was. But I think that Tom seemed like he was so like lost in like how Destiny wasn't getting it, that I don't think that there was a point where he was like, why isn't he getting it? Yeah. I think in Tom's mind, he's like, I keep saying it over and over again. How is he not fucking getting this? But if you listen to the way that Destiny replied, I wish I remembered just a little bit better so I could exactly point it out. But yeah, if you were listening to how Destiny was responding to him, I was catching where he was, where Tom was losing him. But it just, they both just kept going. It just looped over and over and over and over again. I would say it looped a lot more than Destiny usually allows for. Yeah, they both got triggered. Destiny got triggered because he's like, why the fuck do you keep saying this over and over again? And I think Tom was like, why do I have to keep saying this over and over again? It was frustrating, but kind of funny.
Moderating
but in like the worst way possible.
For notice is very kind of you to do.
Bro, of course, man. You guys are both the homie of both you guys, so it's totally cool. Don't mind it at all.
And I see some familiar names in this chat too.
Yeah?
They know who they is.
Yeah. So.
All right, I'm gonna start up the live.
You're gonna start up the live now? All right, cool. So I won't even do my intro, guys. Like normally with the music and all that shit, I'm just gonna say, what's up, guys? Welcome to Fresh Event Podcast. I'm here with Destiny and Andrew Wilson. Boom. We'll do some quick announcements, and then I'll just turn. Oh, who wants to go first? Andrew or Destiny?
I'll open first.
Yeah, they finally got it.
No problem with that.
Sure.
And I breathed a sigh of relief.
Yeah, I feel like that's fair because I was the challenger.
All right. Destiny's okay with that. So what I'll do is I'll also give you guys like a 30-second warning. So you guys kind of know, hey.
I think Destiny kind of knows what's coming too. He looks, let's see, let me just go back like a hair here.
Give you guys like a
30-second
warning.
And annoyed already. Yeah, it went on for way too long.
So
like way too
so
long.
you guys kind of know, hey, try to wrap it up if you can.
Okay.
And I'll time each round. So the first one, the 5 minutes, the opening statement will be 5 minutes.
Waiting on the confirmation.
Just waiting on the confirmation.
Man, I need my chair back. All these chairs are killing my ass.
You got my friend Big Mo in studio or what?
Yeah, he's here.
Tell him I said what's up.
Because they knew what we were doing, so like, nah, we don't want to fuck this one up, so we're both gonna come down.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Pretty sure he's blacklisted. Andrew, oh, I don't know. I've seen the blacklist though. But I think it was prior to this. Fun fact, I said this before on stream too. Mr. Girl is not blacklisted by Destiny.
Refreshing, making sure I get confirmation.
Yeah. We started the stream. We're just waiting for it to like pop up on all the different platforms.
Sure.
I think we're live up on YouTube now.
I see YouTube.
YouTube's up. Okay. And then once we're go on all of them, I'll make the intro. Welcome, guys. Roll in when you guys can.
Waiting on locals in Rumble.
Okay.
Oh, I think I see locals. Right when I said that. That means Rumble should be. All right.
We're live?
It's true.
Okay. All right, guys. What's up?
100%
Welcome
correct.
to the front. Oh.
Let's go to beach one.
For all the streamers that talk shit about Mr. Girl, I bet they would bend over backwards to have and deny it to have him on stream because he is absolutely content. I think he really livened up Twitch poll a great deal. It was like the best, like that, not even just like when he was on people's stuff, but like that era was like the best content based.
Go ahead.
2, 1.
All right, and we are live. What's up, guys? Welcome to the Fresh Air Podcast, man. I'm joined by two people that I call my buddies, good guys, contrary to what people might say. Andrew Wilson and Destiny. Today I'm gonna be hosting a debate between them on was January 6th an insurrection? Okay, the way this debate is gonna go is we're gonna have opening statements by both parties for 5 minutes, where they're gonna, identify their arguments, their stance, who they are, introduce themselves to you, etc. That's gonna be 5 minutes uninterrupted. Then we're gonna have 3 minutes where each of them are gonna be able to lodge their arguments for 3 rounds of that for 3 minutes, going back and forth. And then we're going to have 2 rounds where it's an open 5-minute dialogue. I'll be timing each round, staying as a neutral moderator. So guys, if you're not familiar with Destiny or Andrew Wilson, please go subscribe to both their channels. I'm cool with both these guys. Obviously we don't agree on everything, but I respect both these guys as skilled debaters, and they're good colleagues.
So I was just trying to search my Twitter for my definition of insurrection, and when I typed my name, somebody has Drazi Elder, 0 followers and 0 following, and it's not me. That's weird.
So please go check out their channels on YouTube and on Rumble and all the platforms that they're on. The Omni Liberal on Twitter, the Paleo Christ. Was it the Paleo ChristCon on
just Paleo ChristCon, yeah.
Yeah, on X. So go check them out on all the platforms, guys. I'm happy to be able to host this debate. So other than that, we're live on all platforms, YouTube, Rumble, etc. Check us out on rumble.com/freshafit. And Andrew, I will turn it to you to go ahead and start with opening statements, and I'll start the timer.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you to the entire Fresh and Fit audience for coming out, and to DGG as well. We're here today to debate if the events of the January 6th Capitol riots were an insurrection or if they weren't. Simple. It's a simple debate prompt. They either were or they weren't. Looking into the idea of insurrection itself, it isn't exactly clear what the meaning of it is. It does always seem to be tied together with violence or some will to overthrow a government, law, government system, government itself, or resistance to that law, or something akin to this. The Supreme Court hasn't given us any guidance on this as they wash their hands of it, and to date, not a single person has been charged or convicted of insurrection who participated in any of the J6 rioting. This includes Donald Trump himself, who was acquitted of inciting insurrection. You would think, with no clear guidance of what an insurrection is, a lack of anybody being prosecuted for this supposed insurrection who participated, and a president...
Is the name Elder Drazi... I don't like this debate structure. Is the name Elder Drazi a reference to something? Yeah. It's Magic the Gathering, the card game. There's giant Lovecraftian horrors called Eldrazi. In there, there's like 3 giant Eldrazi titans, and then everything, all the other ones are like spawned off of them. They're just big, terrifying creatures. They're my favorite creatures in Magic the Gathering, which is, I started streaming just Magic stuff. And it was a lot catchier. My original name was Real Lady Fingers because I have lady tattooed on my fingers, which is just a dumb name if you want people to remember your name. Too wordy. So I just thought that Elder Drazi was unique enough and simple enough for people to be able to remember it, and then you could shorten it to Drazi or Elder, and it just makes it it's just an easier name, and I like it.
Acquitted of inciting one, that would be that. The events of January 6th were a protest that turned into a riot. This is nothing new. Democrats do it all the time. In fact, Destiny in 2021 completely agreed with my current assessment. Please, if you don't mind, play clip 1.
Thank you. I like the banana dog.
We will make that available to you. Bills is going to roll it up right now. And I will go ahead and give you an extra 5 seconds just on your thing, just because. Okay, go ahead. Play the video, please. Bills?
If you think the majority of the people there were actually trying to do that, and all they managed to do was like kill, like one woman got shot by the cops, you're fucking delusional. I think most of the people probably showed up to protest because they were fucking mad, and then shit got riled up. There were probably, almost for sure, I would say, some genuine bad actors there that had fantasies of invading the fucking Capitol and shit. Now, I think I heard from...
In all fairness, prior to seeing what comes after, this is a pretty good move by Andrew. Me too. He's too cute. I have to do him at least once when I stream. Yeah. Fun fact: I had that dog because I used to have a dog named Annabelle, who we called Banana, or Banana Dog, and I was like, oh, it's a banana dog. I want to get that on there. She's the most popular emote in my Discord. The dog with like the googly eyes and the mustache is Annabelle.
From the FBI that it was like 5% or less had some plan to do something. Even that number sounds a little bit high because 5% of however many thousand people, there's a lot of people. But I don't think every single person who went there, their goal was to destroy the White House or destroy the Capitol building and take it over. But because if they were, we would have saw way more shit.
Okay.
Now, just so you know, I have no visual on my end when those play, and I'd appreciate it if you guys could put the visual up on my end as well.
Okay.
In fact, Destiny even agrees such rioting and political violence is part of the democratic process, akin to voting, he says.
I do think that Destiny having that take in the beginning and then moving away from it after looking into it actually makes his point stronger. Because I think it just shows, it lets him demonstrate how if you don't know anything about it, it looks the way that the people who won't call it an insurrection think it is. And that after just a few days of looking at it, how obvious it becomes that it's not like that at all.
He said this to justify the George Floyd or BLM riots, that such riots were just one side of the Democrat coin and baked in to our Democrat process. The tail's in, and just the other half of democracy, he says. Of course, he later denied this. Please play clip 2.
Okay. And we'll get this so that you can see it. Just 1 second. I'm going to stop the clock while we're right now, we're 2 minutes and 46 seconds in. Oh, hold on, Bills. I'm going to start the clock once we're back.
Agreed. Shows how with information he's willing to be swayed. That's a good thing. But I agree. But also baked into that, there's an implication that anybody who's actually willing to look at the information should be swayed as well. It's almost a declaration on the people that haven't looked into it to say, like, if you think this, clearly you haven't looked into this at all. Because it becomes rapidly apparent that this was an insurrection with just a little bit of research.
Up once, to be fair here, once the clip is up, can you see it, Andrew?
I cannot see the clip, no, on my end.
He's going to make it visible to you here in a second.
I don't know why, but I just want to comment, since you're here, Mantis, how often, just thinking about that woman on Tom's stream the other night, how often does Tom have people that have that little brains on? Usually historically when I've watched him, it's like he's going over stuff himself. That woman was infuriating. And then for everybody else, Tom had a really, really stupid person arguing with him on his stream, and I was just lighting her up in chat. Eventually Tom let me on. Yeah, Josie. And I had no good intentions. I just went on there to make fun of her, and I did, and I'm really proud to say that it got to her. She was still repeating what she thought I said after I left, well, after Tom kicked me. Rightfully so. I don't like that person at all.
Second.
Great.
And I stopped the clock just so everybody knows. Bear with us, guys. We're using a million different things, OBS, Zoom, all this other stuff. Shout out to Bills in the back, working hard. Can you see it now?
I can see something. There we go. Perfect.
Okay. So we will roll the clip now. I'm going to start the clock back up. Bills, go ahead.
It's some new things he started since he started his short stream They flood the shorts chat, and he enjoys arguing. So these days he's having a lot of morons on. It's infuriating at times. I see. Okay. I like the more informative streams of his more. I mean, don't get me wrong. Obviously, I stuck around. It's not like I hated her being on the stream. She didn't come to short stream. She's a red pillar, essentially. Yeah, she said that she's working on a chat GPT project, and it was wholly unbelievable. Like, nobody, I can't believe that. I think that it would be very tough to believe that. If she meant she was using chat GPT for something, fine.
Disingenuous sack of shit. Because, as I've debated you in the past, you started talking before January 6th ever occurred about how the BLM riots were justified. It was just the other side of the coin of voting. Of course, once you realized that grip wouldn't do as well for you when you were debating the Rittenhouse shit, you completely 180'd your position.
Did I ever say writing is the other side of the coin of?
Yeah, she is insane. The slurring and the singing is very cringy too. No redeeming qualities.
Probably did.
That's a really strange statement. If I did, that's a really strange statement. But go ahead. Okay.
Try to find a clip.
Activism and riots are one side of the coin, and the other side is voting. There's conspiratorial at all. I think that affecting political change like this is fine. Like, that's part of the goal. Like activism and riots are one side of the coin, and the other side is voting.
It was very rare. Like, a lot of people who watch me stream don't get a chance to really see me be mean very often. I was mean.
Woo.
So, listen, 20 seconds in. Go ahead.
So, why the radical change of heart on this topic from Destiny? This complete 180? Well, that's simple.
I told him to minimize these interactions time-wise purely for my own selfish reasons, but it's his stream. If he's having fun, then whatever. He was till he wasn't. He eventually broke to, what else could she mean by ChatGPT project besides using ChatGPT for something? I said to her, do you mean you're using ChatGPT per project? And she said no. And I was like, no chance. No. You're not working with or for ChatGPT. It is not happening. That's ridiculous for her to espouse that. There's no way. It was refreshing. Tom's too fair at times. He wasn't being fair to the audience. Okay? She was just droning on and on and on nonstop about total fucking nonsense. He needed to rein it in, and I was very happy when he finally broke and just yelled at her.
He hates Donald Trump. A simple motivation, but at least understandable. He also hates Trump supporters. In order for him to justify that he wants them all to be unalived, he needs to brand them all as traitors and insurrectionists. In this way, he can build a case that Trump supporters are evil, and so it is justified to use violence against them. To recap that, Trump supporters are evil, therefore anything which happens to them is fine.
It would be really easy for Destiny to get him on that. That's not a justified stance.
Going so far as to say his friend Pisco, the only reason he wouldn't have liked Trump to have been unalived by this would-be assassin is because it would motivate Republicans. This, of course, gives us an entailment that if it wouldn't motivate Trump supporters, he would be fine with Trump having met his demise in this assassination attempt. And this is the last clip. Play clip 3, please, and then I'll wrap this up.
Okay, we're 4 minutes and 20 seconds in. I'm going to stop the watch while we pull this up.
You should have seen when she first came on his stream. That one was the third time. Oh my God. The first time I was like, is she high or drunk? It was awkward. Tom didn't know what to say. Yet she sounds drunk. She sounded drunk the whole time. It was fucking incredible. Although I was cracking jokes about that and stuff, but I thought I heard her clanging a can on her desk a couple of times, so she might have actually been drinking.
Approximately 4:24 seconds, but I'm adding another 5 from the first clip and how we were pulling it up. So
far beyond that. So far.
Okay. I'll start the clock back up once we roll the clip. Can you see it, guys? Can you see it, Andrew? Oh, sorry. He's screen sharing it right now. Give us 1 second. We'll pull it up. Thank you, audience, and thank you guys for bearing with us here. many things going on. We want to make sure that Andrew can see it as well as the audience.
Yep, I can see it.
You can see it? Okay. Bills, go ahead. I'll start the timer back up.
So far beyond that. So far giving a fuck beyond any of these fucking losers. But go ahead, yeah, fine.
Can I ask you a question? So, and you don't have to answer if you don't want to.
Yeah.
Do you wish the attempt had been successful?
Do I wish that the attempt had been successful? Am I even allowed to say anything about that?
You don't have to answer that.
Here's what I'll say. This is what I will say. I don't know, because I'm trying to Fed post or whatever. Here's what I will say. A failed attempt is probably the worst outcome of anything that could have happened. I'll say that much.
I disagree. I think a successful attempt, if that had happened.
Well, actually, hold on. We might agree. The successful attempt.
Stop real quick, Bills.
It would be an attempt at that point. The successful.
Real quick. So, guys, we just hit pretty much the 5-minute mark. Destiny, if you're okay with it, I can let this kind of go on another minute or so, and I'll afford you an extra minute and give you 6.
Yeah, you can learn about this thing out now.
Sure? Okay. All right. So.
So weird to me how strict he is on the time. I remember that when I was watching, I was like, what the fuck is happening? Why is this like the most important thing happening here?
We'll complete this out. I'll time it. Whatever I gave Andrew, I will give to you as well on your opening statements if you're okay with that. Go ahead, Bills. Roll the clip back. Thank you, Destiny.
Whatever. Might be the worst thing that happened. But if it was the worst thing, it would just because of like the country's reaction afterwards, basically. Which is possible, yeah.
Well, I mean.
So, ultimately, Destiny needs to be able to provide us with what an insurrection actually is. An actual working legal definition, or even a personal one, so we can work off of that to understand the mindset of a person who claims this was an insurrection, even as nobody ultimately is prosecuted for.
Destiny needed to not respond right away and sit down and really think of a definition. What sit down? He needed to say, I need to think about that because Andrew's a fucking wily fucking rat. Like that's what I did when I was at my old job watching this, and there is a definition that I'll have to re-come up with between the stream and the next one that I don't think that he could twist around like he does
for
here.
An insurrection. He, to date, hasn't done this for the same reason the Supreme Court and higher courts won't. If they do define it strictly and categorize it strictly, then it's likely Democrats and even Republicans are engaging in them all the time. Non-stop, in fact. I am, in fact, willing to, in the ultimate spirit of good faith, concede that if Destiny just can't really define an insurrection or tell us what goes into that category and not into the category of a riot, that he really has no business calling anybody an insurrectionist, especially when nobody's been charged with an insurrection in regards to J6. Nobody, and certainly not convicted. I will concede, however, if he concedes Democrats are likely involved in insurrections all the time, using violence for political change, I'll concede Republicans may be as well if his definition is that broad. However, that will eliminate his moral high ground for the justification of do what you want to them because they're traitors. That would also make you a traitor. With that, I'll cede my time. Note in that video.
So everything that he just said is really just there so that he can force Destiny to produce a definition, which he can run down the presuppositional logic tree and deny. That's the whole purpose that served. None of the words matter there at all. He doesn't care about any of that because he's just sort of created this trap where if the definition isn't totally perfect, he can shift around everything Destiny says to say, well, then this is it, this is it, this is it. Same thing when he was breaking down the difference between cats and dogs. All of his arguments are the same. It's like, you can't tell me exactly where one differs from the other. So Destiny has to have an ironclad definition here. Otherwise, Andrew gets to declare himself the winner. Which I fucking hate it so much. I really do. Yeah, he put the burden on Destiny and kept his hands clean, slimy. Yeah, Andrew makes like no claims in this.
That
other than
the entire audience, when he was asked this question by Pete,
other than the one that he has built into say that if you give me this definition, then I can say that you're a traitor too. That's the only claim, is that you can't come up with a definition that'll meet this criteria. That's it. because he's pretty confident, rightfully so, that Destiny's not going to have a perfect definition that he can't fuck with.
Isco said, yes, we would have preferred that Trump was unalive during that assassination attempt. Go ahead.
Okay. So that I have approximately 6 minutes and 45 seconds there. Destiny, I will reset the clock and allot you the same exact amount of time to stay fair here. Let me know when you are ready, and I'll restart the clock.
Yeah, I'm ready whenever.
Ready? Okay, I'm going to start it now. I'll give you 6:45, and go ahead, brother.
All right. I believe that the subject matter of the debate is whether or not January 6th is an insurrection or would be considered an insurrection. Originally, Andrew, but I can do a 1v2 debate against my 2021 less educated self as well. I have no problem speaking to arguments I've made in prior clips. I have no problem speaking to current arguments made by Andrew. So
I do really like the little snide remark there. It's very justified here.
We can head down that road. I think that the first thing that we need to acknowledge when we talk about the structure of the United States government is that the Constitution of the United States is the supreme law of the land. The Constitution is what powers our three branches of government, and it sits above every other part of our government, and every part of our government must comport to the Constitution. I think this is a foundational American belief and principle, and if you don't share on this foundational belief, then we're never going to connect in any sort of meaningful way when we talk about how U.S. law or U.S. process or procedure or whatever should be carried out. So that being said, there was an amendment to the Constitution, the 14th Amendment, and Section 3 of that amendment basically goes on to say that any prior oath taker that has engaged in or aided in an insurrection is no longer allowed to hold office, essentially. Now, the question that we come to today is trying to define what is an insurrection. And while in modern times, it seems like an insurrection is a term left to a dictionary or a term left to internet debaters, at the time that the amendment, the 14th Amendment, was framed, what was an insurrection was pretty well understood. An insurrection includes four vital elements. One is an assemblage, meaning a group of people that have come together. Two is resisting any law or interfering with the course of a government proceeding. Three is you have to do this by way of force or intimidation. And four is it has to be through for a public concern or a public cause, not a private thing that one might be interested in. Just for some understandings of when we say an assemblage, we can look to in 1861, Justice Benjamin Curtis said a combination or conspiracy by which different individuals are united in one common purpose. So not just a bunch of people in a city protesting.
Cats and dogs is such a weird example for the definition thing. Like there's reproductive barrier between them. It's not as if there's any ambiguous cases. Yeah, the reason why he did that is because for most people, it's going to be very hard to define things down to the degree that Andrew's going to demand of them. Even so far, even like the difference between cats and dogs, most people just aren't equipped to do that. So I think that for him, it's a pretty safe bet to make that kind of an argument. Just knowing that most people don't think about definitions in this way. And he's so well practiced in it. It's like if you play a fighting game with somebody and they always pick the same character because they have a cheesy spam move, and they win a lot just using that. That's how I see Andrew. He just has one move that he always uses and it's cheap and it's frustrating because it's just really hard to navigate around. It's not an example of how skilled he is. It's just an example of how willing he is to use the same move over and over again. And you just have to wonder, how is he even having fun playing this game when that's all he does? But then on the other side of it too, he also acts like, it's all me, baby. Like, I'm just that good. Like, I can press down forward square over and over again as well. It's all I can think of. My buddy Tom used to spam a move in Mortal Kombat with Kung Jin in Mortal Kombat 10, and I got really good at Kung Jin, the better variation of him, because he kept spamming that move and he wouldn't just learn the best variation of Kung Jin. And that's what I used that to get on like the leaderboards of Mortal Kombat, basically out of spite. because he kept spamming the stupid move.
Different things, but
and I see Andrew Wilson the same way.
People that are united in one common purpose. We can look to Justice Samuel Chase in the case of Freeze in the year 1800. He says, if a body of people conspire and meditate an insurrection to resist or oppose the execution of any statute of the United States, a statute such as the ECA, the Electoral Count Act, which is what they were united on January 6th.
I always played with Kirby in original Smash Bros. Me too. In the new one, I use Cloud, but I like Smash Bros. To be my Mario Party of fighting games. Everybody takes Smash serious, and it makes me sad because I like Tekken and I like Mortal Kombat a lot. These are the serious fighting games, and I like Smash to just fuck around with. I like items on. I like to be a little chaotic and nutty. I even have a hard time tracking my character when there's that many people on screen. That's fine. It's just supposed to be a good time, and everybody's decided like this is the fighting game we care about. It drives me nuts.
To insurrect against, they were opposing the execution of that. They are only guilty of a high misdemeanor, but if they proceed to carry such intention into execution by force, which we did see on the day of January 6th, regardless of if every member engaged in force or just one.
At least Kirby, you can get in them lucky hits with the mallet and just take them right out.
They are guilty of the treason of levying war, and the quantum of force employed neither lessens nor increases the crime, whether by 100 or 1,000 persons is wholly immaterial. Doesn't matter if you have an insurrection of 50 people, 100 people, or 1,000 people. You only really need 2 people there to make it an insurrection. In terms of whether or not they were resisting a law or interfering with the cause of government, we can quote here, an insurrection against the United States requires resistance to any statute or some public law of the United States. This is a quote by Judge in, I think, 1826. Curtis spoke this to a jury. He says, the law does not distinguish between a purpose to prevent the execution of one or several or all laws. An insurrection could be directed at a legislature as well as at executive officials. William Rawle declared that an effort to coerce repeal of a general law to be an overt act of levying war. And Justice Field's opinion in the Great House Court case held that any effort to coerce the conduct of government constituted an insurrection, such as when people went to the White House, or I'm sorry, went to the Capitol to coerce Pence to overthrow the election, which is what Donald Trump told them to do. By force or by intimidation, quoting Justice Marshall in 1807, the most comprehensive definition of levying war against the king or against the United States, which I have seen, requires an assemblage of men ready to act and with an intent to do some treasonable act and armed in warlike manner, or else assembled in such numbers as to supersede the necessity of arms. You don't necessarily need weapons to do it. You could just have the numbers of people there threatening to use force or intimidation. And then for a public purpose, obviously, the insurrection is to, I'm quoting Judge John Kane here, insurrections to redress by force national grievances or to reform real or imaginary evils of a public nature. Obviously, they were protesting the vote. That's what they were there to do. This is obviously a public issue. So to recount, for the assembly, there were hundreds of people.
Okay, sorry, I just wanted to make sure. I didn't want to pause it in the middle of what his definition was. Oh, it's the list of definitions that he gives is way too broad. It's way too wordy. It's kind of a disappointment. I'm a little bit disappointed in Destiny because he really ought to know better. Like he knows who Andrew is, so he really should have known better here. And he should have had a personalized definition that was a lot harder to attack. So that's interesting. I wonder if there's a bunch of kids who aren't allowed to have any fighting games besides Smash because it's become the default that way. Maybe. Emery got me to play Multiverses, and it's essentially a Smash clone with a couple of features added in or changed. It transfers over pretty well, except for jumping is different, which fucks me up if I try to play Smash with people. But yeah, I'd say that like those two games are probably the most accessible to like kids with strict parents.
People that breached the Capitol building. There were thousands that trespassed on federal land. For 2, there was a clear resistance to the federal law. The trespassers were there to contravene the Electoral Count Act. There was a plethora of evidence brought up in the Anderson versus Griswold case about this, where quoting the judges on that case, they said substantial evidence in the record showed that the mob's unified purpose was to hinder or prevent Congress from counting the electoral votes as required by the 12th Amendment and from certifying the 2020 presidential election. The third element, the resistance made extensive use of force. This is self-evident just by watching watching any of the videos. To quote the Colorado Supreme Court again, the mob repeatedly and violently assaulted police officers who were trying to defend the Capitol. Obviously, there were calls to hang Mike Pence, and people marched, very famously, with 1776 signs, which, as many in this audience might be familiar with, was a very popular insurrection in U.S. history, or a rebellion even, one might say. And then for a public purpose, it was obviously for the public purpose of resisting what they perceived to be as the stealing of the election. There are ways to try to counter this argument. We can either use nonsense definitions of insurrection, but that doesn't really matter. The only thing that matters was the public understanding and the legal understanding of insurrection at the time the 14th Amendment was created and when Section 3 was framed, because that's what the Constitution demands, that we look at what was thought of as an insurrection when the language was added to the Constitution.
I'm going to have to refine this, but what I have, I tried to write it out. This might not be perfect. I was really happy with the one I had before. But I think the one that I would go for is a plot enacted by a group or an individual to seize control of governmental powers to enact their will, opposed to the will of the seized government. Opposed to the will of the seized government powers. Because you're not seizing control of the whole government. I could word it a little better at the end there. To enact their will, opposed to the will of the powers of the seized government. So when I don't think that you could say that for a riot. A riot is an act of rebellion against it. Because I think that that's the main difference is like in an insurrection, you want to be the person, take care, Mantis. You want to be the person that's making the decision that the government would be normally making, or a decision or a number of decisions. You want that decision-making power. Whereas a riot is just sort of, in a riot, the ultimate goal would be to get the government to use its power to enact your will. And I think within an insurrection, you're trying to seize that power for yourself. You're trying to make your will happen rather than sort of convince the government to do it.
We can try to divert by talking about BLM or anything else, and I'm happy to dive into all of those examples if we are going to concede on the original argument that January.
I'm pretty sure that wasn't exactly my original wording, but I think that's a pretty decent definition of an insurrection.
January 6th satisfies all four elements of what I consider an insurrection to be. If we want to concede that and move on to analyzing any particular BLM action or whatever, that's totally fine. We can talk about the likeliness to...
And I feel pretty confident that the counterexamples that Andrew Wilson would give would not fit this definition.
Work of which an insurrection has never been defined as. An insurrection doesn't necessarily have to lead to the overthrow of a government. That would be understood as a rebellion. Every insurrection is not a rebellion, though every rebellion starts as an insurrection. And then when we say, this is a common one as well, why was no one charged with an insurrection? People can be charged or couldn't be charged with crimes for a variety of reasons, but for purposes of the 14th Amendment, nothing in there requires the criminal conviction of the crime of insurrection, only that an
I guess it's when you try to take state power by force. Let me think. I think that the reason why I worded it the way that I did as opposed to that is that that would also that could also imply a coup. We're not drilling down to we're not drilling down specific enough, I think. I think the intentionality would be the deciding factor as to whether it was like a coup or if it was an insurrection. Like if you just take over the state and now you run the state, that would be like a coup, right? Try to take state power by force. I'm not sure. It's not a terrible definition at all. That might be able to stand.
Insurrection occurred and that one engaged in it.
Sort of shooting fish in a barrel here.
All right, and that is 6:40. Okay, so just 5 seconds shy. That completes the opening statements. Really good arguments from both sides here. We'll go into round one. I'll turn it back So we just completed opening statements, guys. Each party had 6 minutes and 45 seconds to make their original stance and their first opening statements. We'll go to round 1. I'll set the clock for 3 minutes. Andrew, let me know when you are ready. And
I'm ready.
Okay, timer is going now. Go ahead. 3 minutes.
So let's start with this idea of my definition. What the hell do I care about your definition? Nobody has been prosecuted for any insurrection by any definition.
Who can be a type of
Destiny
insurrection.
comes through and he gives us this list. He says 1, an assemblage. Okay. 2, resisting any law or interfering with the course of a government proceeding. Okay. 3, by force or intimidation. Okay. 4, for a public purpose. He has just outlined basically almost every single political riot I've ever heard of. That is what that is outlined. So let's see, an assemblage. This would cover a riot, a bunch of people assembling. Resisting any law or interfering with the course of a government proceeding. That could be shutting down roadways for commerce. That could mean anything. By force or intimidating, if you have Black Lives Matter, other groups like this who are out there saying no justice, no peace, that would be very intimidating. And then
now, when you listen to this, it sounds absolutely ridiculous what he's saying. Because Andrew will disregard the meaning behind words immediately if he can take their literal meanings to discount what you're saying. That's what he's doing right now. Like when you talk to him, you have to be super, super specific about everything. And that's why that's the trap that Destiny fell into. He gave such broad definitions there, which is absolutely crazy to do. Like his biggest crime, Destiny's biggest crime in this is that he knows who Andrew is.
For public purpose, very nebulous.
He
All
knew
of
better.
this is completely nebulous language. He has not actually given us a definition at all. By the way, if you could cam me while I'm talking, I'd appreciate it. He has not given us a definition at all. He's just kind of given us this loose, nebulous, framework for what is or isn't an insurrection. So let's kind of dive into a couple more things here. He says people can or can't be charged for a variety of reasons. That's not saying anything. So what? Yeah, that's true. Maybe they committed insurrection and they weren't charged for insurrection, but also maybe they did not commit insurrection and that's why they weren't charged with insurrection. That's a non-argument. He says that these elements, third element, self-evident, Colorado Supreme Court using 1776 signs.
Asking why nobody was arrested is such a bad argument. But I will say, oh, I switch earbuds. I will say that it plays super well to like the Trump base because it sounds good, but it is nonsense. The definition or whether or not it there's no bearing on whether there's been a criminal trial or not. It is like the thing that makes me most frustrated with Andrew Wilson using that is that how quickly he would dismiss. I think Destiny's definition didn't specify about trying to take power. That's bad. I'm assuming that you're saying you hate Andrew Wilson and not me, Portland. I'll just go ahead and assume that. I don't know. Destiny gave too many. I was listening a lot when he said them, but then I paused after I thought he was done, and he was still giving them, which is really bad. Something like 14 people convicted of seditious conspiracy, but for some reason, anyone who wants to talk about is the word insurrection. It's so stupid. Yeah. And like I said too, Destiny knows better. He knows who Andrew is. When it's all hinging on the word, you gotta be so specific. Thank you, Portland. You have to be autistically specific because Andrew is autistic as fuck. Well, that you will not be a fan. Well, maybe you will of this series. This series is my attempt to sort of deconstruct Andrew Wilson and kind of show exactly what he does And I think that because I feel like I have such a good pulse on it that as I go, people who are watching it are going to be able to know what kind of things he's going to pull in advance before he does them. As I go over some of the more and more debates of his. And the kind of the hope is that just sort of demystify the whole thing. I hate that anybody would think that he's smart. It drives me nuts. Or that he's a good debater.
People use 1776 signs all
he just
the
has
time
hacks.
and have absolutely no interest in any type of rebellion
he's just a
whatsoever.
hack.
It's very common for people to have those as bumper stickers. That doesn't mean that they're going to be engaging in any kind of rebellion or insurrection at all. He also, as he talks about these various rulings, he says treason of levying war comes in. Obviously, insurrection seems to have something to do with levying war against the United States, or at least some type of start to levy war against the United States. He still has not actually demonstrated any of this. He's just given us this really nebulous idea. An assemblage resisting any law or interfering with a course of government proceeding by force or intimidating for public. This is very nebulous. So unless Destiny is going to concede,
it isn't that nebulous, but it is too nebulous for Andrew.
That anything which meets this criteria is an insurrection, then I'm not even sure how to go forward with this debate. How in the world can he say essentially almost any riot on planet Earth or any assemblage, even a peaceful protest where they shut down the roads, is an insurrection? That can't be true. That just can't be true.
Okay. We had ended there at about 2:57. Andrew, you're up on our channel. They can see you. I don't know if it's on.
Yeah, we're good on mine too.
Oh, you are okay. Perfect. I just want to make sure that we're there. So, but you are definitely up on, and
I invited him to have a one-on-one with me on Wiki TV recently. He ignored me out of fear, but maybe I imagine I'll wrangle him someday. It's not that hard. I was just saying earlier, he's the first person I ever debated in the space, and he tried really hard to take me down the presuppositional logic tree. Failed to do so, said I was insane, and then left after 2 hours. And it was also, he also had two people with him that would just like hop in whenever. So it was a 3v1 debate. And I did get it. I got him to admit that he didn't get me on anything too. So that was nice, which is as good as he'll allow people to do against him.
Whoever's speaking, I always make them the main person. So Destiny, I'm going to put, this is round one. I'm going to put 3 minutes on the clock for you. Are you ready?
Yeah.
All right, go ahead, brother.
So I think my definition is pretty clear. There is an assemblage. There's a clear resistance to the implementation or the execution of some federal law. The resistance has an aim to make use of force or intimidation, and it's gathered for a particular public purpose. BLM almost automatically fails on the fact that these were not usually demonstrations against federal law. I don't know the federal law or the federal thing that was being resisted by BLM. But again, I'm happy to dive into any particular BLM supposed insurrection or riot if you'd like. But again, I mean, that has nothing to do with January 6th. And if you want, then you can see that entire argument and we can move on to analyzing individual BLM instances. But again, you'd have to show that there was some implementation or carrying out of some federal function for it to be an insurrection against the United States government. States might have their own definitions of state insurrections. I'm unaware of any. So to say again, my definition of insurrection, like very clearly has 4 elements. If you want to suggest an alternate definition that you feel more accurately comports with what you would consider an insurrection to be, that's fine. But we can't just say that it's nebulous and there is no definition when
I think if you're debating somebody who's like Andrew Wilson, it is a smart thing to say if you would like to give a definition. Do you think fits better? That's good. But because it's actually Andrew Wilson, he's never going to do that. He'll never do that, and he'll just let you continue to give your non-perfect definitions so that he can pick them apart. Because he's not, he has no integrity for any of these debates.
we've got references made in our Constitution and in our federal criminal code to insurrection. That doesn't make any sense.
If that ever does happen, though, Portland, let me know.
We can complain about people being charged with an insurrection or not, But whether or not somebody is charged with an insurrection, again, has nothing to do with the event itself. For instance, if I were to look and see at any number of BLM riots, if I were to look at a riot, would a challenge to that riot be, well, was anybody charged with rioting? If I could show you a riot where people clearly engaged in a riot, where there was a mass of people that were engaged in violent behavior that involved the destruction of some property or violent activity, but I were to say, well, look, nobody was actually charged with rioting, would you say then that, well, I guess nobody was actually, or there wasn't a riot that actually happened? Nobody would make that claim. There's a whole list of reasons why a prosecutor may or may not charge for particular crimes. In this particular case, there were really good reasons not to head down that insurrection charge road, because it would probably put the Supreme Court in a very hairy area, which they might end up getting into anyway, in terms of actually having a strict definition of what an insurrection is. But again, the 14th Amendment doesn't require a strict definition of insurrection in order to disbar somebody from running from office. All it needs is for a court to engage in asking the question of whether or not somebody had engaged in an insurrection, and if they had and were a prior oath taker, then they were barred from taking any public office in the future. So yeah, again, if there's an alternate definition that wants to be explored for an insurrection, then I welcome that. But that definition, it needs to comport with the historical and legal understanding of what an insurrection was. Otherwise, it's just meaningless, meandering, opining that means nothing, when we should be thinking like, what was the definition of insurrection at the time the 14th Amendment was drafted.
Okay, that's 2 minutes and 40 seconds. You don't want to use the rest of the 20 seconds, Destiny? Okay.
I mean, like, we can, if this ends up going into like a whole bunch of like BLM stuff, I mean, we can get to that, but that has no bearing on whether J6 would be considered an insurrection or not. So,
okay. So 2 minutes and 57 seconds. That completes round one. I will restart the clock. We'll move into round two. I'll turn it back to you, Andrew. Let me know when you're ready, and I'll turn the clock on.
So I'm not claiming that this has anything to do with BLM. I'm doing an internal critique and saying that if you're going to apply these nebulous standards to this, then you must apply them to this. If this category, if category A over here, also would include everything which includes a riot, then we would need to know what the delineating factor is. He claims here there must be some federal element. However, that's not in his definition. His definition does not include any federal element. To go over his definition again, an assemblage, resisting law, by force or intimidation for...
You also can't change your wording. If you slip up and try to change your wording, Andrew will not let you reword it. Whereas if you're talking to somebody like Destiny or anybody who's acting in good faith in a debate, you could be like, well, I meant to say this, and then they'll move on from that point, assuming this is what you meant, because the intellectual progress of the discussion is what's really on the table here. Andrew wants to look good and make the other person look bad. That's all that matters.
Public purpose. It doesn't say anything about a federal element.
Which I like debate. So for me, this is like a really like kind of a pathetic thing to do. It defeats the purpose of what the debate is for, in my opinion.
Pulled that out of his ass. I don't know where the hell he got that from. It's definitely not in his definition. If it was, he should have said that that was in his definition. He keeps going back to this illogical idea that just because X doesn't happen doesn't mean X isn't true. Yeah, that's true, but it also doesn't mean X is true. So making the claim that, well, wait a second, Andrew, just because they weren't actually charged with insurrection doesn't mean they weren't guilty of insurrection. Well, that's nice, but it doesn't mean they were either. And I have the evidence on my side, as none of them were actually prosecuted for insurrection. None of them were prosecuted for insurrection, and Trump was acquitted for inciting insurrection. So the evidence is on my side. He would actually have to demonstrate that this was an insurrection and that they were all wrong, that they were completely incorrect in not charging it this way. He just keeps saying, well, there's a variety of reasons why they didn't. Well, that's nice. Couldn't one of the reasons be because it wasn't an insurrection? Yes, that seems to be a very obvious reason, doesn't it? Going back to my opening, I just want to kind of point out that Destiny has changed his entire idea on this, whereas at first he claimed in 2021 this was in no way an insurrection, that it fit the criteria of a riot better from anybody who's looking at it objectively. I agree with him. That's exactly what it fits. But he still has not demonstrated at all that this was actually an insurrection. He just says, well, I have this nebulous definition. He also says, give me a counter definition. It's not my burden to give you a counter definition. What do you mean? I'm not calling him insurrectionist. You're calling him insurrectionist. I don't have to define for you what that means. You have to define for me what.
The only way that I think that he can make this claim in good faith is to say, I don't believe in the idea of an insurrection.
That means giving me these 4 elements here is meaningless unless you can tell me what goes in those categories specifically that does not go in the category for rioting. Because as I look at an assemblage, resisting any law by force or intimidating or for public, that could all just be rioting. That does not really tell me what goes in the category. You didn't include federal anything. So I would like for you to actually expand on this definition so I can understand what the hell you're talking about and why the J6 are
I don't know if Destiny adds the federal element or not, but I know that he doesn't actually care about an expansion of this. He cares about, or that I don't think that he would give Destiny the ability to change the definition to include federal either, though. If you've seen how he debates, he'll go, well, originally you didn't say that at all, so I don't think that that's what you actually think. I think that you got caught out, so now you're trying to sneak it in. That's the kind of tactic that he uses.
Specifically fit this criteria.
All right. That is 2 minutes and 49 seconds. Destiny, I'll turn it to you whenever you're ready. And we are in round 2 right now, the bottom of round.
Yeah, so people like, again, so there's 2 parts to the insurrection, 2 elements that I don't think would fit. So the first one is an assemblage. That would clearly fit a riot, I think, but it would fit a riot and it would fit an insurrection. The second part is resisting a particular law or interfering with the course of a government proceeding. There are plenty of riots that aren't riots.
The government proceeding is way too flexible.
To resist like the implementation of a law or to interfere necessarily.
And I say these things like I know that they should be, like, if you're thinking like, well, this is obvious, why are you pointing it out? The purpose of the series, I want you to get to think the way that Andrew Wilson's thinking when somebody's talking. So as soon as he says to interfere with a government proceeding, that's what he's going to leap onto immediately. Like he's thinking, like he's trying to see in everything that this person's saying, how can I semantically mold this to be way broader than it is? How can I invalidate what they're saying with any slip up that they have? I feel like this whole debate is missing the motivation. Nobody's explaining why it matters if something is an insurrection. Yeah, you are correct. And this is why I think Andrew Wilson happily took on this debate. Because it's not about whether January 6th was bad, whether or not it was treasonous, anything like that. Andrew Wilson took on this debate because it is a debate of definitions, which he is particularly well versed at. That's his spam move, you know? That's the thing that he can do over and over and over again in every debate to give him an edge. Not just an edge, too, most of the time. It's just... if the person's willing to go along with it, he can do this forever.
With like some government proceeding. We can imagine a million reasons why people might riot outside of a baseball game. People might riot in protest to a statement that was made or in relation to, I don't know, the outcome of a sporting event. Like there's...
I think for Destiny, the motivation is that he's sick and tired of people acting like this was no big deal. Like this wasn't something that it clearly was. Which was an attempt to change the outcome of the election. So I think that he recently researched all this. He's really impassioned by it but I think partially because he was wrong originally. And now he's rightfully blown away that so many people are supporting this action. Whereas Andrew Wilson, his motivation is purely to make Destiny look bad and himself look good.
Tons of people that can riot that aren't rioting with the goal of resisting the implementation of a particular law or trying to interfere with the course of some government proceeding. So the part 2, the second element I've listed, really wouldn't comport with most riots. And then the third one is the third element by force or intimidation. I would say that riots generally have a forceful or intimidating aspect to them, although they generally happen spontaneously. Usually they're not planned in advance to use like force or intimidation. So To quote Justice Greer, quote, legal authorities carefully distinguished planned insurrections from spontaneous riots. Justice Robert Greer charged the grand jury in the United States v. Hanway that a defendant who was not leagued with violent resistors to federal law could not be prosecuted for treason. Greer insisted that spontaneous riots were not insurrections, that insurrections required a commitment to use force to resist law, not spur-of-the-moment violence. Most riots just kind of like happen. It's pretty rare that they are planned in advance, and I think we all agree that if they are planned...
Now that I'm hearing how these officials are wording it, there might be something to the legal definitions of some of the words that he's using when he says, like, resist the law, that is going to be missed on people like me, maybe even people like Destiny and Andrew too, who just aren't familiar with, like, these kinds of, like, legal proceedings. There might be some heavier implications there that might be more informative than, like, just the plain definitions of these words as we're hearing them.
And in advance, it takes on a much different character, and arguably could call under it like different types of crimes. If people, engage in rioting, it's not good. But if people are literally planning it out in advance, we are calling in a whole bunch of different crimes there than just the simple thing of calling a particular thing a riot. And then for the fourth thing, when we say for a public purpose, the fourth element, this is the second thing that I don't think.
It's literally a debate method called arguing by definition. Guys like Destiny don't want to set firm definitions because they want to use sophistry and talk in circles. I don't know. I don't think that you can put the intentionality there on him. But I would say that Andrew Wilson specifically debates by definition because most people aren't used to having to do that, because there's, generally speaking, when two people are talking, there's going to be some kind of understanding about what's being said, and they don't have to be that specific. And then they can just use clarifying questions as they go in order to get an understanding of what the other person's saying. If the purpose of the debate is to determine whether something's right or wrong, or how something really was, you would probably want to engage in some kind of flexibility in your language, so that way the conversation can move forward. But Andrew Wilson's goal is to keep the conversation as still as possible. He doesn't want it to move forward. And the thing that I dislike about this is that it's purely self-serving, and it does nothing to get a better understanding of the topic.
Most riots would necessarily be in opposition to, that we are insurrecting.
I would say that it's like a perversion of intellectual debate.
For some sort of public grievance relating to like the actions of a particular government. So like you might riot, for instance, like BLM might riot against like police violence, but what is there's not like a particular federal statute or federal law there. In terms of me specifying the federal part, well, I mean, J6 was a insurrection against like a federal entity. Again, if we want to talk about like state insurrections or something, I guess we can, but the differentiating factor here, the reason why I have the federal part is because we're talking about federal insurrections, and especially for the 14th Amendment, the federal insurrection part is what we're kind of talking about. I'm not even sure if you can do a state insurrection, maybe you can. But I mean, like summarizing this argument, like the Colorado court found that Donald Trump acted as part of an assemblage, okay, that he helped bring into being. He called the people there. Trump was resisting the enforcement of federal and constitutional rules. He was contravening the 12th Amendment, and he was resisting the Electoral Count Act. Donald Trump, he took numerous illegal actions to prevent the peaceful transition of presidential power. This is like a function of the government. He engaged in an ongoing course of conduct aimed at producing violent resistance to the peaceful transfer of presidential power, and he was attempting to incite support to attack Congress. Yeah. Whether or not somebody's charged doesn't matter. Okay.
That is time. So what I'll do is that concludes round two. Andrew, I'll turn it back to you unless you want me to give Destiny a little bit extra time, and I can give you that extra time as well on the back end, but I'll let you choose that.
Yeah, I'm fine. He can finish.
Okay. Destiny, go ahead and finish. And
yeah, sure. The final point was that yeah, but my final statement is, okay, if you looked at the Colorado court case, they found that Donald Trump acted as part of an assemblage that he helped bring into being. It said that Trump was resisting the enforcement of federal and constitutional rules, that Trump took numerous illegal actions to prevent the peaceful transition of presidential power. He engaged in an ongoing course of conduct aimed at producing violent resistance to the peaceful transfer of presidential power. He attempted to incite his supporters to attack Congress, which they did, and that Trump's speech occurred sufficiently close in time and place to when and where the insurrection took place to be considered an incitement. Like every single part of this, like very easily and very cleanly meets the definition of insurrection. If we want to argue that my definition isn't clean or that my four elements aren't being met, that's well, I don't know how we can argue that. I think all 4 elements are being met. If we want to argue that, well, every single riot would, fall into this, then we could say, well, fine, Destiny, I agree. For your definition of insurrection, fine, January 6th was an insurrection. Now let's talk about these other events, and we could talk about whether they fit or don't fit. Or you can give me your own definition of insurrection, and then we can go from there.
That would work with most people, but Andrew's not going to give a definition. I have to stop at 12, so I'm going to just stop here because I don't know if there's going to be like a more fluid place to stop. I'm going to pick it up tomorrow from here, and I'll be able to go through the whole rest of it tomorrow because I don't work the next day. I appreciate you guys being here. I'm going to probably before I stream tomorrow, I'm going to like create a playlist of different debates Andrew's had, and after a few streams of this, I'll have a watch party for that one where the guy's just sort of talking to him to try to get a little bit better look at just how he thinks and what he thinks about things. Since we don't get a whole lot of that in his debates, we just kind of get little snippets here and there. So yeah, that's it. I'm gonna start winding down to go to sleep so I can work tomorrow then. Have a good night.